Most small business owners don't fail because of a lack of passion. They fail because they're running blind. I'm Mark Anderson, and I help small business owners make data driven decisions using the information from their accounting records. My mission is simple. I want to make a dent in the small business failure rate by teaching you how to use your finances to make better decisions. Welcome to Business on the Run. I started my professional career, if you will, as a golf professional, and I've had this conversation with Trish a number of times where I feel like one thing that I think that education does very poorly is prepare us for the different job possibilities that are out in the world, right? And what I did was, I was on the high school golf team down the street, literally from right here, Country Place Golf Club. And that is where I started my career. The one thing I knew was that I was going to be awful with college. I just was not, especially as an 18, 19-year-old kid coming right out of high school. So naturally, what did I go do? I decided to be a golf professional. I was going to be a PGA golf pro. And it started right down there at Country Place, where I started literally driving. I drive by there on my cart every once in a while and go, I used to pick balls on that field right there. And did everything from doing donuts on that range to getting hit in the shoulder with a golf ball going at who knows how many miles an hour. It started there. The golf pro that I used to work for there, I eventually made it into the pro shop, right, where I was working as an assistant pro. And he decided that he was going to take a golf professional position in Florida at a place called the Golf and Racket Club at East Point. So I moved 1,200 miles across the country, and a funny little story about that, and to give you an idea of how naive I was at the time, and how little research I had done about the big move I was about to make. Was I remember driving cross country. He's driving a U-Haul. We're pulling, I think, my truck on a trailer, and I'm driving his car. And I remember. Oh, by the way, I should tell you the job was in the West Palm Beach, Florida area, right? And I remember crossing the border into Florida, going, "Thank God we're almost there." Little did I know that was really just the halfway mark. So kind of a funny story. But anyway, made it to the Golf and Racket Club at East Point, and this is really where I learned how to deal with people. The Golf and Racket Club at East Point was a predominantly a Jewish country club, and it was notorious in the area, and I didn't know this at the time either, but notorious in the area for being one of the most difficult group of people. But I really enjoyed it. I thrived because I took it as a challenge to really get to know these folks and to, really just be friendly and helpful and useful, right? The guy that brought me cross country to do this ended up quitting after 6 months. Here I am all by myself, feeling like, man, I just got ditched. But it turned out to be really, really great. But I ended up having such a great relationship with almost all of the people at this club. It was really a neat place. And, I guess a couple of interesting things about my time in the golf business was one gentleman that I used to teach. His name was Justin, and he had Alzheimer's disease. And it was really kind of tragic in a way, because I knew that he was wasting his money and I was wasting my time. He was not going to remember anything, but it wasn't about that. And that was what I finally, kind of learned about that situation, right? It was just about him having someone he could spend some time with. Kind of a joke that some of the people in the pro shop would make was, "Mark, I don't know why you don't just go out there, slap your hands on your knees and go, 'Great lesson, Justin,' and just ride back and collect the money." And I was like, no, we're not doing anything like that. That's just not cool. Another thing, this is really kind of the high point for my entire golfing career, really, is I remember taking what's called the PAT, the Player's Ability Test. I had tried and I had failed several times before, and it really wasn't that hard, but there was some of the pressure when you too a 3-foot putt when you're playing golf. I mean, that may seem easy when you're walking up to a putt range or something like that, but when your knees are knocking and your hands are quaking, a 3-foot putt looks like it's 100 miles long. I was taking this player's ability test. I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was at a golf course in Boca Raton. Boca Raton. I don't remember where it was or what the name of the club was exactly, but to pass your player's ability test, you had to basically shoot the equivalent of 278s, right? It was a 36-hole test. Par for the golf course is 72, and you could shoot basically 156 to pass, right? And basically, I went out, I commenced to shoot an 82. So if current trend continues, obviously I'm going to fail, right? We broke for lunch after finishing that 18 holes, and I just, I was this far from just quitting and not. It was like, man, the odds of me making it in this one, it's ridiculous. It's, I was like, what else do I have to do? I don't have anything better to do. I took the day off to do this, so might as well give it a shot. So I basically told myself, it's like, look, just go out and make a par on the first hole and see what happens, right? So just one shot at a time. Made a par, made a par, made a par. Make a long story short, I basically parred every hole all the way up until I got to the 18th hole. Now, mind you, now I know I'm actually back in the running for this thing, right? I could actually pass. Even as nervous as I was, I ripped one right down the middle of the fairway. I am sitting pretty to make my 18th par in a row. I don't think I've ever made 18 pars in a row. I never made 18 or 17 pars in a row before. It was always a birdie or a bogey somewhere along the line. Ripped it right down the middle of the fairway. And I remember the green. It was a small green, par 4, bunker in the front, and the pin tucked right behind the bunker, right? I want to say I hit like an 8 or a 9 iron. And basically I hit it fat. I hit it probably, half inch behind the ball. I chunked it, and it goes right into the bunker. And to make matters even worse in the bunker was that it did what's called a fried egg. It plunged in there, and it's one of the hardest bunker shots that you can hit. Trying to think through all the different scenarios that could possibly happen and how I can do this. Because I know that the one thing I know for sure, there's no way in the world I can get it close to the pin with that lie, regardless of how close I was. So I hit the shot. I know I'm going to hit it way long, so I'm just praying that I can somehow keep it on the green. And I basically had like a 45, 50-foot putt, and I could 2-putt to be one shot better, or I could even 3-putt. And basically I knocked it up about 3 feet from the hole, and I knocked in that putt to qualify with one shot to spare. The big lesson that I learned from that is just never give up. No matter how bad the situation may be, you're making a conscious choice about whether or not to give up or not. My golf business taught me a lot about how to deal with people and how to deal with failure. Those are the two big lessons learned. And then eventually I decided to go back to school. So then I want to say this is the early 2000s or so, where I was still in the golf business and working up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Arlington. It was great because at that point I had Eric, my son. He was small at the time, and I retell this story to Eric all the time because we both get such a kick out of it. When we're driving by the big semi trucks, he just loved the big semi trucks, and he didn't know how to say truck at the time. So he'd always say, big car, big car, big car. That was just such a cute thing. And then the other one was when we're teaching him the noises that animals make. He could never say elephant. It would be epitaph or something like that, right? And we always taught him with the snout and everything. So that was really cute. But anyway, loved moving back to Texas because it made it easier for my family to come up and visit and that sort of thing. But eventually we decided we would move back or I would move back to the Houston area. Eventually what ended up happening was I decided I'd go back to school to get basically an associate's degree in something. So I decided business administration would be the route that I would take. And that was the point where I took just a basic accounting course. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a CPA, and I know that I'm going to have to go more than just an associate's degree. But that was when I kind of made that decision. That was sort of the turning point for me, where I had a much more clear vision about where I wanted to go with my life. Much like when I was in high school, I still hated school, right? I still hated school. Here's what I learned. People learn in different ways, and school is geared for people that learn a certain way. And if you don't fit into that box, you will end up being a loser in school. Okay. And I was definitely a big loser in school. The difference between when I was in high school versus this, and believe me, along the way, I managed to find myself on, I guess, what was it, Animal House, that super secret double probation, whatever. I was in the worst form of academic probation that you could be in. Student loans and that sort of thing was completely off the table for me. That was definitely not. They were not taking a risk on me for that. But the big difference really was a difference in mentality. I knew as a student I would have to work harder than every other student if I was going to get the same sort of grades. And while that didn't necessarily make me happy, that was the mindset that I took, and that's what got me through school and really passing my CPA. When I went to take the CPA, I just had the mentality that, if I study harder than everybody else that's currently taking the CPA, I will do better than all of them. So that's all that I need to figure out how to do. From Alvin Community College, where I ended up getting straight A's in that first semester back. And I took 18 hours that semester too, by the way. That was the most they would allow me to take, despite my poor academic history. Financial aid was then back on the table, thank goodness. And I ended up going to the University of Houston Clear Lake campus. Started taking, I always had to go to the counselors to get permission to take more classes than they would allow other students to take. I would just say, hey, listen, I'm in my early 30s. I need to get back to the workforce as quickly as possible. Give me a break on this. Look at what I did back at ACC with all of my straight A's and all that. They eventually let me do it, and I blazed through school as quickly as I could. I want to say I had a little better than a 3.6 GPA, but super confident that it could have been even better if I wasn't going at such a rapid clip. I was taking so many classes. Even in the summers, I would take 12 hours or more if I could, and eventually graduated from there. But before I graduated, I also did an internship at a firm that I ended up spending almost 10 years at. And that was where I learned really a lot about really accounting. I mean, it's funny because even when I was doing my internship, I still had to take some classes. And ironically, I was doing my audit internship. I was actually taking audit class at the same time. And it was funny to be in the class and understood all of the same, all of the principles are basically the same. But it was funny because that was when I learned the big difference between, the textbook and real life. They would say something, I want to say something about the way that accounts would be confirmed or something like that, right? The only way you could ever do this is by mailing confirmations out to people and stuff like that. And it was then that I realized that, the real world doesn't always line up with the textbook. Because I was like, no, we don't do that for everything like you're saying. There are always exceptions to the rule, which brings me to another thing that I learned too. Everything is circumstantial, right? You could ask a person a question about something, or the teachers about something, and oftentimes the answer would be, it depends, because you have to know the background behind everything. There are always going to be exceptions to the rule, and you have to be able to understand and work your way through the exceptions and that sort of thing. So while I'm doing the internship, I had the pleasure of working with a lot of really, really great people. Ended up going back to school and finishing up my college courses at UHCL and eventually graduated with my master's degree. I want to say I graduated in 2006, 2003. Honestly, it's so much time has passed now, but somewhere in the early 2000s is when I got my degree. And that was just a super exciting time. And eventually I accepted an offer from the firm that I did the internship with, became a full-time auditor, and some of the things that I really, really enjoyed, one of the biggest things I really enjoyed about doing financial statement audits was the project-based nature of it. It wasn't a rote, routine thing that you did every same thing day in, day out sort of a thing. The beauty of it was that it was a project, and I got to learn about so many different types of businesses, and you really got to kind of look under the hood and see what makes this business different versus another business, right? Like a manufacturing company, for example, versus a retail business. The accounting is, very similar. There are a lot of big differences that make all of that work. But so the project-based nature was really a lot of fun because it came to, obviously the project came to an end, and then you'd go on to the next audit and work on something else. And that was good in two ways, right? Sometimes you ended up working with a team that really kind of sucked. So the nice thing I would always tell myself is, you know what, the project is eventually going to come to an end. You will be on a new audit and on with a new team and that sort of thing. On the flip side of that is you could have a really good team and you're like, oh man, bummer, this is eventually going to come to an end and I'm going to be on a new team. So it was good and bad, but I really enjoyed the project-based nature of audits, helping those businesses at least identify the areas of concern that they needed to go and pursue and correct. But in many respects, I felt a little bit empty because I didn't get to really, roll up my sleeves and help, right? So left a little bit of a void there. I really enjoyed the firm, and this was UHY, and I really enjoyed the firm because of the people that were there. It was really just a great bunch of people, and I loved working with those folks. I played golf with a number of the partners, and had great working relationships with many of them. Matter of fact, even here just the past week or two, here in January, I had lunch with one of the partners that I used to do some work with, and so it was nice to reconnect. But I remember back in the days of UHY, I could walk down to the partner's office and have a conversation, and we would deal with an accounting issue, and we knew what the path forward was from there. No further discussion required. And then eventually BDO came along and purchased UHY. We had a much bigger presence in the Houston area than they did, but nationally, they were definitely a bigger middle market firm than we were. That walking down to the partner and talking about an accounting issue was no longer on the table. We had to run it up the flagpole to the national office and let other people deal with those things. So the level of bureaucracy went up, and that was the part that I didn't enjoy. Rather than complain about it, which I think a lot of people do, and it makes them bad employees, in my opinion, is those that complain. I chose that, you know what, I don't like it. I am just going to go ahead and move on. And that's exactly what I did. From there, I actually started doing some contract work for, again, with the idea that I love dealing with projects and really fixing accounting records, right? And I did that at a full-time scale. It's not what it was today where I'm doing it for small business, but it was a full-time job as a CFO type person. I'd come in, I'd clean up the books, and then I would move on to the next project. I still really enjoyed that, but it was a little bit volatile for my taste. It was great money-wise, but when you end up stopping, finishing one project, not knowing where the next one's coming from, it can be a little disheartening. So that was when an opportunity to do it for smaller businesses came along, and that was really the birth of Know Your Numbers. I called it something else before. It was actually, hopefully I can say this, but it was Anderson Accounting and Advisory when I first started. And kind of a funny story that I'll tell about it is that, has everybody here heard of Enron? Right? Okay. So Anderson Accounting was the accounting firm that did the audits for Enron, and spelled the same way as me. Kind of a funny aside, one of the guys that I was working with when I was at UHY, this is just kind of an example of the nature of the people that were there, right? When I was interning, he spread a rumor in the audit department that I was actually the great-grandson of Arthur Anderson because I spelled my name the same way, right? So anyway, getting back to the firm name, is I'm a year in, and I'll never forget this because it was literally Thanksgiving Day before I am going to celebrate Thanksgiving dinner with family, that I get an email from a company called Anderson Tax. And it was basically a spinoff of the old Anderson accounting firm that had failed Enron and all the shareholders and was part of the big scandal and all of that. Basically telling me that I could not use my own name in my firm because they had trademarked it. I was told by my attorneys that, hey, you can fight this, but it will probably bleed you dry. This is a David and Goliath type of a situation. They've got, deep pockets with as many attorneys as they would need to squash me like a bug. So I ended up changing it to Know Your Numbers, which I feel like it was a good thing in the long run anyway, because that really fit the messaging that I'm trying to communicate to small business owners anyway, that you've got to know your numbers. You've got to know your numbers. I can't tell you how many people that have learned of the name of my business and have said, that is just such a great name and it really represents what you do. Some of the things that kind of helped me get off the ground with Know Your Numbers was when I first started the business, was really just talking with small business owners. I would go to some of the ribbon cuttings. This was very, very early days of the business back in March of 2018, April. After first getting it started, and I would try to have financial conversations with small business owners, and they would make a comment like, yeah, I don't even know what a balance sheet is. And that terrified me, not for me, but for them. Because if you don't know what a balance sheet is, that tells me that you don't know a lot about a lot of other things about your business's financial situation. That was really what kind of lit the fire with me in trying to teach small business owners how to learn how they can use their financial information to make data-driven decisions. So that was the big aha there. So to kind of round out the reason I'm so passionate about small business owners and knowing their numbers and financial statements, I think there's one client in particular that I think about, and he was somebody that didn't know anything at all about what a balance sheet was, what an income statement was, or the purposes for any of those. We put together a financial package for him, and one of the things that we did was we actually presented graphically the balance sheet. And basically it had one graph at the top with assets, and down below it had liabilities and equity. And when he started the business, the big thing that we worked on was getting him into a situation where he owned as much of the business as his lender did. And the neat thing about that was, his equity number on this graph was way down here. The debt number was way up here. And it was fun to see the progress, because every month that gap closed. And it became smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually it actually met. And once that crossover happened, that meant now he owned more than his lenders. And that, to me, those are the kinds of exciting milestones that can be had if you're looking at your financial information, if you know what to look for with your financial information, and have a good enough relationship with the people that are like us helping prepare that financial information. They can help you and guide you, because the balance sheet is something that can be managed so that you can do things like be prepared for a loan if you want it, and that sort of thing. Can I expand? Do I have enough capital to do a big purchase of an asset? Those are the sorts of decisions that can be used, or be made rather, with a financial information. Thank you for listening to Business on the Run. Please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, whatever that might be. Be sure to also like us on social media. I've got it all in the show notes so that you can see how to reach out to us. And if you have any kind of questions at all about your financial information, feel free to email me at marka@hirekyn.com.